All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating. We're going to unpack a 500-year-old essay by the great thinker Erasmus. You see, he came across this weird old saying from the ancient world, and he just couldn't let it go. And where his investigation leads? Well, it's a timeless and honestly a pretty disturbing lesson about power. So here it is, the saying that just completely grabbed Erasmus. And it's from the Roman philosopher Seneca. One must be born a king or a fool. I mean, just think about that for a second. A king and a fool. What on earth could possibly connect two figures that seem like total opposites? Erasmus was hooked, and honestly, so am I. And that's really the central puzzle for us here. Why would a proverb from the ancient world suggest that kings and fools are basically two sides of the same coin? It just doesn't seem to make sense, right? I mean, a king is supposed to be the opposite of a fool. They're supposed to be wise. So let's follow along with Erasmus and see if we can crack this thing. Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, Erasmus does what any great thinker does. He starts looking for a pattern. He dives into the myths and the history books of the ancient world and, well, what he finds is basically a who's who of terrible, terrible leaders. He kicks things off with the classics, the epic poems that were basically the blockbuster movies of their time. And it turns out even these huge, legendary stories are just filled with shockingly foolish rulers. He starts with a big one, Homer's Agamemnon, the guy leading the Greeks in the Trojan War. And Erasmus, he does not hold back. He's like, what could possibly be more stupid than sacrificing your own daughter just to get a promotion to commander-in-chief? And then you've got Achilles, right? The greatest warrior alive. He throws a massive, childish temper tantrum and risks the whole war effort because someone took his girlfriend. I mean, these are not wise leaders. They're just driven by pure, foolish emotion. And this pattern, it goes all the way to the top. I mean, literally. Erasmus points out that even the king of the gods, Jove, or Zeus, was often shown not as this all-wise ruler, but as a total buffoon, constantly turning himself into like a swan or a bull just to cheat on his wife. The highest power in the entire universe, and he's portrayed as a fool. Okay, fine. You might be thinking, that's just mythology. But this is where it gets really interesting. Erasmus argues that when you look at actual history, the proverb hits even harder. The real world, it turns out, was just as packed with foolish rulers as the stories were. And he's got some great examples. Case in point, Xerxes, the king of Persia. Seriously, if you ever need a textbook example of how not to be a leader, this is your guy. And the story is just, it's so absurd, it's perfect. So a storm destroys a bridge he built. And Xerxes gets so angry that he orders his men to give the ocean, the actual water, 300 lashes as punishment. He literally whipped the sea. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up. But here's the thing. It's not just the obvious bad guys. Erasmus even points to heroes, the most celebrated conquerors like Alexander the Great, to show how being a king can create this very specific kind of foolishness. You know that famous story about how Alexander the Great wept because there were no more worlds to conquer? Well, for Erasmus, that wasn't a sign of greatness. It was a sign of completely foolish, bottomless ambition. Think about it. Instead of wisely ruling the massive empire he already had, he was driven by this almost childish need to find other worlds to conquer, worlds that didn't even exist. And believe me, the list goes on and on and on. Erasmus just starts rattling off names, entire dynasties of terrible rulers. The Dionysiuses, the Ptolemies, the Juliuses, the Neros, the Caligulas. The point he's making is that the evidence from history is just overwhelming. For centuries, having a wise leader wasn't the norm. It was the crazy, rare exception. So, okay, we've established the what. History is full of foolish kings. But now Erasmus gets to the really crucial part, the why. Why does this keep happening? And part of his answer is, well, maybe it's our fault. We, the people, tend to praise our leaders for all the wrong things. And what's absolutely wild is just how modern this part feels. We praise a leader because, oh, he's good-looking, or he's strong, or he's a good dancer. Erasmus basically says, yeah, those are great qualities if you're hiring an actor. But for a ruler, what really matters is what's on the inside, a mind that's free from foolishness, wisdom, and a constant, unwavering focus on keeping the country safe. And this all leads him to his core diagnosis. The reason we get so many foolish kings isn't just bad luck. It's because the entire system for raising them is fundamentally broken. It's a system that's almost designed to fail. He lays it all out, step by step. It starts when they're babies, handed over to people who teach them to act like little tyrants. Then, as kids, they're surrounded by people who do nothing but flatter them and tell them they're brilliant. As a teenager, it's all about distractions, gaming, dancing, chasing girls. And their so-called education, they just read stories that celebrate the worst conquerors in history, like Caesar and Xerxes. The whole system, Erasmus is saying, is practically guaranteed to produce a fool. So, okay, that's the diagnosis. But Erasmus isn't just here to complain. He offers a solution, a pretty radical one. He basically proposes a complete overhaul of how you educate a future ruler, a curriculum designed to create not a tyrant, but a true philosopher king. And he gets this idea straight from Plato. The whole goal is to raise a ruler who thinks like a philosopher, someone who actually dislikes the stuff the average person goes crazy for and is instead guided by pure reason and a genuine desire to do what's best for the people. So, his whole proposed curriculum is about one thing: a complete mental reboot. The prince has to learn that being in charge is a responsibility, not a prize. That real glory isn't about conquering more land, it's about making your own country flourish. And maybe most important of all, he has to learn to avoid war at all costs. And Erasmus found this perfect symbol for what a good ruler should be, and it comes from ancient Egypt. It's an eye right above a scepter. Simple but brilliant. The eye represents the wisdom and foresight to know what to do, and the scepter? That's the power to actually do it. See, you need both. Power without wisdom is a disaster. You know, at the end of the day, this wasn't just some academic thought experiment for Erasmus. He understood that the difference between a good leader and a bad one wasn't just a philosophical point. It had huge, real-world consequences. The stakes are, quite literally, everything.
And he lays it out in the most dramatic terms you can imagine. A good prince, he says, is like a living image of God on earth, a force for good that creates prosperity, builds great cities, and brings peace. But a bad prince, he's a copy of the devil, a destructive force who loots the country, destroys cities, and starts wars. The fate of millions of people rests on which one you get.
Which really brings us back to today, doesn't it? Erasmus wrote all this 500 years ago. He was trying to figure out why the world's safety depended on the whims of these kings and fools. And you have to ask yourself, the titles have changed, sure, but the basic question is just as important now as it was then. On whose nod, on whose wisdom, or whose foolishness does the safety of our world hang today?